Hey, what is up guys? My name is Rahman and I've been using AI in my software engineering job for over a year now, and I can confidently say that I've managed to at least 10x my output in that time. I wanted to make this video to share the top 5 tips that I've learned in the hopes that I can make the journey easier for you, and then also hopefully encourage you to do the same because it works. And make sure to stick around until the end. I've saved the best for last. Alright, now with that out the way, let's jump into it. Tip number 1. Use AI for code generation. Now I know this is a pretty obvious one, and it's likely one of the first things you did when you discovered AI, but hear me out on this. So this can really speed up development for you. Let's take the age-old question of how to center a div. So instead of going into Google and typing in how to center a div, then going on to Stack Overflow and finding some code that may or may not work, copying it, pasting it into your code, and trying it out, you get Cursor, which is a fork of VS Code with AI capabilities built in. So now that you're an AI enhanced dev, all you do is you highlight the code where you want to center the div, you press Command K if you're on Mac or Control K if you're on Windows, type in center this div, and boom, less than 30 seconds later the div has been centered. And now your boss is super impressed with your new and improved productivity and hands you a juicy promotion. Tip number 2, use AI for code reviews. Now this may sound scary at first, but don't get me wrong, you're not handing over code reviews to AI. All you're doing here is getting AI to do the initial code review, flag any obvious issues or code standards that haven't been followed, and then give you the information. You would still have the final say over whether this code goes into production or not. I find this to be very helpful in avoiding the issue of senior developers not wanting to review long pull requests and saying, looks good to me, and then you have to deal with the issue of production being done the next day. You can use tools like CodeRabbit to set this up. Some of these tools even provide the ability to fix issues directly in the pull request, which is awesome. Tip number 3, use AI to write coding documentation. As a developer, the bane of my existence is writing coding documentation, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way. Tools like GitHub's Copilot and Cursor's Copilot++ provide very good code auto-completion features. You can use these to generate doc-block comments for your code, which is very helpful, which means you don't have to use brainpower to generate a comprehensible comment about your code. You can use that brainpower to actually code. And the AI gets it correctly about 80 to 90% of the time. So you obviously still have to review it, but for the most part, it does the heavy lifting for you. You can also ask AI to write documentation about your code, and it generates a very good initial document based off of what it understands about your code. It's much easier to go from there and change the document appropriately than having to start from scratch. Tip number 3, use AI to learn new tools and languages. This is arguably one of my favorite on this list, mainly because of how much power it gives us as developers. You can learn how something works in one prompt, as opposed to a few years ago where you'd have to do multiple Google searches, dive into multiple Stack Overflow rabbit holes just to figure out how something works. If you don't understand what a div is, for example, all you have to do is go to ChatGPT and prompt it. Explain to me what a div is in simple terms with a simple example. The key here is simple. All you're trying to do is understand the concept. You're not trying to understand everything there is to know about that whole area. I use this very often. It's a good practice to look up any words that you don't fully understand. It makes you very competent in the long run. Tip number 5, use AI for solution design and ideation. This one was a huge one for me. If I have a problem like how do I move away from scheduling all my jobs in cron tab to something more UI driven, at first I have no idea where to even begin. Usually I'd start with a Google search to see what others have done with the same problem using the same stack that I'm using, but this would still likely take me hours to get a proper solution. Instead, I would go to AI and I would give it all the data about what stack I'm using, what I've thought through, what the problem is that I'm trying to solve, and basically all the ideas that I have. Less than 30 seconds later, the AI already has a possible solution for me, or even multiple. Better yet, it can even help me implement the solution through its code generation. Now, this isn't always perfect. This is why you have to be able to communicate with the AI and give it all the data that it needs. And you also have to be able to think to see what it's telling you and fully understand that. So that's the catch. But this is like having a senior developer on your shoulder whispering into your ear. Very powerful if used correctly. Now, there's one other thing that I want to caution you guys about when using tools like ChatGPT and Claude, especially the online versions and the free versions. If you're not on an enterprise plan with these tools, they do store the data that you give them to improve the chatbot. Now, the problem comes in when you share sensitive data with these chatbots. Like if you have a customer and you accidentally put contact information in there, or even some company companies have proprietary software, if you take that code and put it into these chatbots, these things are all against company policy. So what I would recommend in that case is get your company to get you a license to the enterprise version of that chatbot. Alternatively, you can always get a local model like Llama 3.2 to help you with whatever AI work that you need to do. The other thing is you can get Cursor. Just read up on their website. I believe Cursor does not store any of the data that you give it for any improvements to their software. Now, Cursor does use the API version of ChatGPT, and last I checked, the API version does not store any data on OpenAI's servers. But it's always better to read up on these things and follow your exact company policy. I'd love to learn a little bit from you guys. What was your experience? What has worked for you? What has not worked for you? Let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.